Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Student Zone for this session. Today, we will be talking about Razor Pages. No, we won't be talking about shaving. We will be talking about .NET with Cecil. So before we get started, I just want to remind you of the code of conduct. So just be sure, I'm not going to read this entire thing for you, but please be sure that you read it and be good to one another. Just be and if you and one thing I want to note is that if you run into any issues and anybody breaking this code of conduct, please contact the information at the end of this paragraph here. So with that, Cecil, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's go.
All right, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, kind of like what Jasmine said. I hope everyone's home and being safe, and I also hope everyone's enjoying Microsoft Build so far. What we're going to be talking about today is taking our first steps into Azure Microsoft Razor Pages. Now, I just wanted to level set some expectations about this session. So like Jasmine said before, this is a student zone session. So, this is really targeted at folks that are just getting started in their careers, folks that are just, learning how to do things. And so what I want to do is take care of some like I guess you could call it initial steps that you might want to take whenever you're building a web application, right? In terms of knowledge that you might need before, you would have to have a little bit of knowledge about C#. You might have a little bit of knowledge about building, websites with HTML and CSS and those types of things. But other than that, you don't need anything else at all. I'm going to talk to you through all the tools and technologies and everything else that we need to get started. So let's head over to the slides. I don't have a lot of slides, but let's head over to the slides and we're going to start to go through what we're going to cover today. Right. So really quick on the agenda, we're going to talk about what is .NET. We're going to talk about Razor Pages, and then we're actually just going to build one. Right. I'm going to talk for maybe about 20, 25 minutes or so. And then after that, we're going to have a little Q&A session. So there is a Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen, I believe. So feel free to go ahead and drop questions in there. We have some folks that will be answering questions, and then I'll also answer questions at the end. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Now, first, I want to talk to you about what exactly is .NET, right? And .NET is the framework that we're going to be writing our Razor Pages applications on. So if you're not familiar with .NET, essentially it is a platform, or it's a framework that allows you to build applications that run on multiple devices, runs on any cloud. You can build games with it, IoT things with it. You can build AI things with it now, which is really cool. If you've been listening to some of the session that happened yesterday, for instance, you might have heard about things like C#9 and .NET 5, and those are things that are coming later on. So I'm not going to be covering those things in this session, but everything that we talk about today will be able to run on those as well. So that's also good to know, right? This is not going to be wasted knowledge or anything. Now, C#8, which is included in .NET 3.1, I'm sorry, .NET Core 3.1 and .NET Framework, is the language that we're going to be using within this session, right? It has a lot of really cool and interesting features. And I'll show you some of the newer features too as we go through our little demo as we start actually writing code. But hopefully you're a little bit familiar with C#. If you're not, that's fine, because it's not going to be overly technical. But I do want to show you exactly how the framework works. All right, and we are going to be using ASP.NET Core 3. Right now I think the current version is ASP.NET Core 3.1. So I should update that slide to say 3.1 instead. But with ASP.NET Core, we can build web applications specifically, but web applications in a variety of different contexts. So we have the ability to write real-time web applications using WebSockets on a framework called ASP.NET Core Signaler. ASP.NET Core also supports building web APIs, which are hugely important because almost every app today either produces or consumes a web API in some way or form. And then today, what we're going to focus on is actually building a web app or web application. And there's a variety of different ways that folks can do this, whether it's a JavaScript rendered thing on the client side or a server-side rendered thing on the back end. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how we could build, and we're going to see how we could build a server-side rendered application built with ASP.NET Core Razor Pages. Now, that's it for slides for me, which might be some of you might be happy about. I'm going to head over to my desktop, and we're going to take a look at building an app using Visual Studio 2019 for Mac. Now, you could be using Visual Studio Code, you could be using Visual Studio for Windows. The code all looks the same, it's going to publish the same, it generates the same. I just happen to be on a Mac, and so this is what I'm going to use. Now, what we're going to do first is I'm going to create a new project really quickly, and I'm going to select Web Application. And again, whether you're on Windows or Mac, VS Code, or Visual Studio for Windows, we're using the same templates, right? So it's going to be the same process. I'm going to click on Web Application. I'll select Next. I want to use .NET Core 3.1 because that's the latest and greatest, and also the one that's in LTS. LTS stands for long-term support, and you might see that whenever you download .NET Core. All right, and now I need to give this thing a name and a location. So what I want to do is I'm just gonna, please don't look at my projects. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pop this in on my desktop, and I'm just gonna call this build web app because I'm super creative with names and stuff. And now what you'll see here is it's gonna create this application for me, or create this project for me. I'm gonna have like this default folder structure. Notice too how it also gives me the ability to add it to create a Git repository and a Git ignore file and stuff, which is really cool because those aren't things I want to do by myself, right? And it's great that the editor can help me do those things. And now I'll just hit create. And what I'm expecting to happen is in a minute or two, my editor is going to open back up, and then it should be able to, we should be able to see that project that it just created for me. And here we go. Visual Studio is opening. And now, so here I have my web app, and you can see I have, something called pages, properties, www root, and there's a bunch of files in here. But before we even do that, why don't we just run it and see what we get out of the box? So I'm going to hit this play button, right? Or, if you're in Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, you might have a debug button or something. And what this is going to do is it's going to compile the code that was generated for us. It's going to launch my browser. And then I should be able to see the web application that this thing created for us, right? So, it's going to be a very simple web app. Again, we just created it from the default template, so there's not a lot in here, right? Like here's a welcome page. You can notice there's a really interesting menu here that's at the top, and I could, click back and forth. Really simple, nothing too crazy. But now as we go on, let's see how we could make this a little bit more interesting and add more cool features to this. Now, one of the things that I like about these templates is that by default, they come with the Bootstrap CSS framework. Now, I don't know about a lot of you folks, but for me, I'm not the most artistic type person when it comes to designing things. I write C# and I write a lot of backend code, but I don't do a lot of design type things. So this is a really great framework for me because I could come in here, I could search for things like cards or forms or something, and then it's really helpful for me to see how exactly I could, create interesting styles and things of that nature with CSS. Right. All right, now let's head back over to Visual Studio. I'm going to stop debugging. Now let's just explore the folder structure a little bit. All right, now whenever you create this project, you're going to have this www root folder. And inside this folder, that's where you're going to put, if you have any, again, CSS or JavaScript files, any of those static assets, this is where you'd put them. This is where they'd go. All right, and if I open this, you see I have a CSS folder, I have a lib folder. I notice you can see here, this is where Bootstrap is, right? So, it already included Bootstrap for me. And then it has some other things in here that, we're not going to pay too much attention to right now. And then, there's a site.js and there's a site.css. So if I wanted to write my own JavaScript and add it to the file, if I want to write my own CSS, I could simply open one of these ones, and you can see here, I could start to edit or tweak, some of these styles that we have. Okay, so all that's great. We still haven't seen any of the Razor Pages stuff here. If I open the Pages folder, what you'll notice here is that I have an index, I have error, I have privacy, but all of these files that are in here end in a .cs HTML, right? And so what does .cs HTML stand for? And essentially that stands for C# HTML, right? Think about it like if I had C# and I had HTML and I smushed them together, and this is the thing that came out of it, right? And so these are these CS HTML files are Razor pages, right? And Razor pages, like I mentioned, is a merger of C# and HTML. So it gives you the ability to, program your HTML templates and files and things of that nature. So if you can think about scenarios where you might have to render like a table, or you want to show, something like that repeats a lot, maybe like some customer data, or you want to show like some addresses or a list of movies that you're watching, right? Like you don't want to have to copy and paste those things over and over again, right? I could use my programming know-how in C# to be able to kind of iterate through those things and add them in here, right? And so the CS HTML file, right, the C# HTML file is what Razor Pages uses to help render those files that are there. Now, you notice when we open the web browser, it automatically just loaded up the page, right? But how did it know which one to go to? Well, by default, it's always going to go to a file called index. And so this is what we're looking at right now, right? It's almost like the default document. So I don't know if you have, if you've used Apache or Nginx or any other HTML type web server, like if you have an index.html, like it'll use that as the default. Just like in the same way here, it'll use this index.cs HTML file as the default, right? It'll start going in here and doing stuff. Now, why don't we try and create our own page, right? I'm going to try and create a new one here really quickly. Now I'm going to go to add, and inside of VS for Mac, I'm going to click on new scaffolding, right? And inside of all of, again, whether it's Visual Studio for Mac or Windows, like we have this ability to use these built-in templates that'll make it a lot easier for us to just really quickly create these things. I mean, we could create them by hand if you wanted to, and that's fine. But in an effort to move quickly, like that's where your IDE comes in, right? Your integrated development environment. It helps us move quickly by giving us these like templates that we could use to just really quickly create new files and projects and things of that nature. Now, I just created an about page. So what I'm expecting to happen in a second is that Visual Studio right now, it's going out and it's getting the scaffolder. So that's why you might see like some of these messages and things like that going on here at the bottom. And it's going to create an about.cs HTML file because I said I wanted an about page. And if I click here, you can see here's the about page it just generated for me, right? And I could do something like this. I could, I could start writing HTML in here. So I could say div. I'll put a p tag in here. I actually don't know if you're supposed to put p tags in this, but it doesn't matter. And I'm going to say this is the about page, right? And you could put whatever type of stuff you want to put in there, images and things of that nature. And then I can also make use of Bootstrap because I spoke to you all about Bootstrap a little second ago. And I'm going to use the Jumbotron. Okay. All right, so let's run this and see what happens. So notice, right? I haven't written a lot of HTML. I haven't written any C# so far. I just created this page. I've added this Jumbotron thing to it, right? So, okay, this stuff is still working. What happens if I do /about? I hit enter, and there you go. So there's the new page I just created. It has like this big gray thing here because again, that's Bootstrap styling that I just happen to use because we have Bootstrap by default in here. Now you might be saying, okay, well you added this page, but it's not in the menu. Like, how does it get in the menu? And then two, even though these pages are fairly small, you might notice they all kind of look the same, right? Like, how exactly is that happening? Okay, so let's head back over to Visual Studio, and I'll show you really quickly where that's actually going on. Now, on the left-hand side here, we have a folder called Shared. Inside of the Shared folder is a great place where you could put, well, we used to call them master pages, or you can call them your default template. But essentially, it's like the wrapper around all of your pages, right? Like if you think about a regular HTML doc, like I usually have like an HTML tag, and then there would be a header tag, and a style tag, and a body tag. And notice I don't have any of those in here, but it must be coming from somewhere, right? And that's actually coming from our layout page. So if I click on the layout CS HTML, you'll notice that I have all of these different things that are inside here. Right, so this is where like the header is, right? The body is, and all of that type of stuff. And then when we come down here to the container and main, and it says render body, this is the point where our pages get injected, right? Notice it has this @ sign inside of here, right? This @ sign is what tells our CS HTML file that okay, it's time for us to enter C# mode, right? I want to start writing code at this moment. right? So what will happen is that whether it's the index page or the privacy page, or even the about page we just created, like it'll just inject that right here on this render body section. If I scroll up a little bit, you might also notice that, well, here's where our menu is, right? So here's home, here's privacy, right? So if I wanted to quickly add that item to our page, right? Like I'd change this to about, right? And notice this is an A tag, right? This is a regular HTML A tag. But then notice it has this attribute here, right, called ASP page, right? And this is a special attribute that's added by ASP.NET Core, right? And it works in Razor Pages or MVC or any of our other web frameworks. And it allows us to route pages back and forth, right? So essentially, this is just going to generate a link for us that will go to the correct page, right? So I just copied it down, right? I changed it to about, and so now if I run this, what I'm expecting to happen is here at the top, you can see I have now my about page and it's showing inside of my template. Okay. I know y'all are not super like impressed by my styling, but to me, this is amazing. So I hope you're enjoying this. All right. So we saw our layouts. We saw how we can add something to the menu. And then we saw how to create a simple page. Well, a relatively simple page for our about page. So why don't we actually start writing a little bit more code and seeing how C# could really help us create some things. Now, I know a lot of us have been home and we haven't been going out, or at least we're not supposed to be going out. And so we might be at home watching a lot of shows, right? So, maybe y'all are watching Netflix, maybe y'all are watching things on Hulu or whatever the case is. So I thought, okay, well, why don't we take a little bit of time and create a shows so there's a shows page, right? And this is just going to show a list of shows that we might have been watching or you might have been interested in. So here, I'm just going to hit, I'm going to add an index page, right? And I'm going to add an index page to our shows folder that I just created, right? And in a second or so, it's just going to do the same thing it did before. It's going to scaffold this page out for me, and I'm going to be able to see it here. Right, the page is done, right? Now you might be wondering, well, where can I start writing code to like show data and like get some of these interesting things, right? And you'll notice it says here at the top on line 2, it says add model, right? And what the add model does is that it'll allow us to start injecting code inside of this page, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open add model. And now I'm going to need to give it like a list of shows, right? I need to say, hey, I want you to show this list of shows for me on the screen. But how can we do that, right? We actually have to define like what it means to be a show. So what I'll do really quickly is I will create a C# file. So notice everything I'm doing, I'm right clicking and then I'm saying add, right? I'm going to add a new class. I'm going to call this class show. If this thing will let me type on it, show, there we go. And I'm going to create a new show class. And this is just this is going to be a C# class. And now I'm going to give it some properties, right? So I'm going to say property, I'm going to call this title. Yeah. Title. And then I'm going to have another property. I'm going to call this maybe streaming service. Right. So streaming service might be, I got this from YouTube or Netflix or whatever the case is. And then maybe here I'll have like some type of description, right? What is this show about, right? Cool. So now I've defined my show. Now, usually we'd probably get this show stuff from like a database or something of that sort. I'm not going to create a database because we don't have enough time for that. But what I will do is I'm going to create a data class. And what I'll do here is I'll just, I'll create a data service class. And in this data service class, we'll just, we'll create some fake data, right, that we can actually start using inside of our application. Okay, so this is a C# class. Hopefully you folks are familiar with C# a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my data class is going to hold a list, right? So this is going to hold a list of shows. I'm just going to call this shows. Yeah. Now, notice it's saying, hey, well, it doesn't know what list is, right? But we do have a list type in C#. So when I click on that error, it's going to say it's going to add that using directive. And this using directive is essentially just saying, hey, I'm going to allow you to, or I'm going to bring in this type inside of this in this class, and now we have the ability to use it. Right now, I'm going to create two methods in here. Well, maybe I'll just create one method. I'm going to create one method in here. This one is just going to return a list of shows. So I'm going to call this list show. Yeah, and I'm going to call this method get shows. Notice how it kind of helps me with that a little bit. And now I just want this thing to return shows. Yeah. And this should be S. I want to put S here. Okay. So pretty straightforward data class for now. I'm going to go back to my shows section. And now what I need to do is I need to actually, so this model is the one that's attached to our shows, actually shows page, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another property here. This is also going to be a list of show. Yeah, call this shows, very similar to before. And then every time I do a get, whenever this page loads, I want to assign shows to my data service dot get shows. And remember, this would usually be coming from a database. I usually be doing a query or something like that. But in the essence of time, really quickly, we just want to do this. Okay. All right. So we've gotten our data. Right. We've created our data class. We've defined what this looks like. But I still actually don't have any fake data to use. So let's do this. I'm going to create a constructor. Right. And in my constructor, I am just going to create a bunch of new shows. Right. And so in the essence of time, like I'm just going to really quickly just create two. So I'm going to say, shows, right, is equal to new list of show. Yeah. And then I'm going to create some new shows. And so I'm going to say shows dot add, right? And I'm going to create a new show in here. New show. I don't know if anyone has any favorite shows they're watching. I'm going to say title is equal to, we've been watching Master Chef a lot. So I'm going to put Master Chef in there. The streaming service is Hulu. That's where we've been watching it at. Right, and then it is in the description, I'm going to say this is a cooking show. Yeah. All right, there we go. And then I'm going to add one more shows. I'm going to add, oops, take that down. Shows, add new show, right? And then I'm going to say this is show. I've been actually watching this show called Altered Carbon. I don't know if you've ever watched that. This is a really cool show. Altered Carbon. That's on the streaming service, Netflix. Yeah, and then description. I'm just gonna call this sci-fi. Right. Sci-fi. Boom. Right. Great. So I just added two shows to there. All right. So I've created some fake shows. I've wired it up to this thing. So like the last thing that I need to do is actually need to show it on this page, right? And how exactly am I going to do that? Well, again, that's where C# comes in. I'm going to do a for loop inside of here, right? Because remember, we can start mixing like these HTML and C# things together. And off of the model, and the model is this index model, right? And that's where this came from. Off of the model, I just want to say dot shows. And now I actually want to show these shows here. Now, probably what I want to do is put them in some type of, HTML, CSS thing. Again, I'm really bad at that stuff. So I'm going to come back here and I am just going to see if I could copy paste some CSS, because that's what we all do as good developers, right? We copy paste. I'm going to paste that in my for loop, which is really cool that I can do that. And now inside of my CSS, I'm going to say show.title. Right, notice how it knows that since I have show here in context, right, it automatically just adds a show here. I'm going to say show dot, and this one is going to be show dot streaming service. Yeah, and then I'm going to replace this content with show dot small show dot description. Great, there we go. Right, so there we have it. Now let's run this and see what happens. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that it works. I hope you're on my side. I hope you're all crossing your fingers too. And all right, there we go. I'm going to go to shows. Great. And notice now it's showing my shows there. Right. Now, again, we don't have a lot of time left. We have about 5 more minutes. So I'm going to stop here for now because, I kind of have to. I'm going to go back to my slides really quickly. But there is a ton more stuff that we could do with this, right? Like if we wanted to, we could I'm gonna pop up my slides again. Again, if we wanted to, we could add our actual databases to it. We could start, working with like different styles and creating really cool and interesting pages with it. But we don't have a super long amount of time, so I just wanted to stop here. I wanted to share these resources with you. If what you saw looked interesting and cool and maybe something you want to try out, definitely go to this link, take a look at it, and hopefully you all want to try out using Razor Pages. Now I'm going to open it up for a little bit of a Q&A, and hopefully you all enjoyed the session so far.
Oh, they sure did. The Q&A window is huge. Lots of stuff going on here. So one of the questions, one question that I saw that came up pretty often was, could you explain the difference between using a Razor page versus using an ASP page? So for those of you who might know, there is the web forms. And Razor is another version of web on .NET. So could you explain that?
Oh, the difference between web forms and Razor?
Yeah, so pretty much the question was difference between CS HTML files and ASPX files. Someone said they look awfully similar.
Sure. They're awfully similar. It's just a different framework. Razor Pages was introduced in MVC on .NET Framework when MVC 1.0 came out, and this is long before .NET Core. And this is kind of going into the history of it. But what it did was it gave you a little bit more of a more programmatic way to interact with the HTML. So notice, like for instance, with the Razor Page, I could do for loops and I can have if statements, and I could write functions and like do all these really interesting type of things. With the other ones, when we had to do stuff with ASPX pages, we had to deal with a lot of like callbacks, and then there was view state, and there was a lot of additional baggage, right, that was involved inside of that to do something really simple. So one of the benefits of Razor Pages, or just Razor in general, is that it makes it really easy for you to just manipulate the HTML in the way that you want it to without a lot of additional baggage on here. It's really lightweight, it's really fast, and again, it's supported whether you're using .NET Core or .NET Framework. It works on both.
Awesome. Let's see. We have time for one more question. Someone asked. The question was, our team uses pure JavaScript libraries. When would I use Razor Pages instead of a pure JavaScript library?
Well, I think it depends, right? It's more so a question of when would I use a server rendered page versus like an HTML or a JavaScript rendered page, right? So if you're using something like PHP or Rails or Express, like those things render on the server and send those results back over to the browser for the browser to show. So it really just depends on what exactly it is that you're trying to do. If you want to build like a really rich, responsive, really quick user experience with a lot of low latency, and that's really important to you, definitely the JavaScript route is a way that you could go. Things like SEO is important to you. If you don't want to ship your business logic into your JavaScript page, like that's probably something that you want to have run on the backend, right? Like inside of your server side or your server rendered thing, or maybe even your server rendered API. I know for folks, like if things like SEO is important, if things like bots and those types of things are important, all those things are usually forced back down to the server. Folks that are doing a lot of things with even with Node and stuff like that, like notice you see a lot of them are trying to do like these server rendered versions of Node and Angular and stuff like that, because again, like it's the initial load time is faster, right? Because again, they don't have to build the JavaScript, and then also too, like the SEO is a lot better.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cecil. The lots of questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everybody. Again, please check out this link that's here. And then also, I want to let you all know, make sure you do check out docs.microsoft.com. We have tons of interesting things there. If you're interested in building a Razor Pages app, make sure you go to Microsoft Learn. We have a lot of courses and things of that nature that you could go on there and try out today for free. And also, please remember to check out our survey. Please fill it out. And then for any additional resources, I think even the recordings for these things will be available at the aka.ms students at build link. So if you don't have these slides, take a picture, or we'll make these slides available one way or another. But other than that, I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time at Microsoft Build.